A scribe sits in a dimly lit stone room in ancient Babylon. The air thick with the smell of olive oil burning in clay lamps, and you walk into a dense manual of priestly laws. It feels like crossing a hard border between two completely different worlds. It connects the horrific rebellion of humanity to the unyielding mercy of God. It takes the torn, ruined fabric of human history and pins it permanently to the grace of the kingdom that is coming. The crucifixion is not just an execution. It is an architectural joint. When Jesus breathes his last, the Gospel of Matthew records that the heavy veil inside the temple is torn violently in two. From top to bottom, the silver hooks of the Old Covenant can no longer hold the weight. They give way, because the true cosmic Vav has finally been driven into place. God refuses to let his creation pull apart into the void. He uses the nail to hold the universe together. But the physical nails of Golgotha are not the only hooks required to complete the story, because when the ancient work of the cross is finished, the tension shifts. It moves from a hillside in the first century directly into the quiet, agonizing waiting rooms of your own life. This is the space between the chapters. This is the brutal, quiet territory of the modern waiting room. We have trained ourselves to live segmented lives. We compartmentalize. We put the trauma in one box and the triumph in another. You survive the breakup. You lose the job. You get the diagnosis. You treat these events like isolated islands of experience, trying desperately to sever the painful moments from the rest of your story. But if you could read the original Hebrew scroll, you would see something our English translations almost always erase. You take a black marker to the years you want to forget. You try to cut out the season of addiction. You try to erase the decade you spent wandering. You want a clean narrative, a straight line from birth directly to success. But the divine author refuses to let you edit out the dark. He takes the reed pen, he drives the conjunction into the page. He connects the season you hate to the person you are becoming. And it came to pass after the grief. And it came to pass after the failure. And it came to pass after the collapse. We read our own lives the way we read the English Bible. We assume the book of disaster has nothing to do with the book of joy. We assume the waiting is just wasted time. The silent space between your chapters is not a void. It is the tension of the hook. When your life feels like it is blowing apart in the wind, it is not disintegrating. It is being fastened. The same peg that forces the anarchy of Judges to connect to the redemption of Ruth is driving through the parchment of your own history. The failure of yesterday is being hitched to the grace of tomorrow. The devastating loss is being bound to the restoration you cannot yet see. You would see a pattern hiding in plain sight. Exodus does not actually begin with the words, "These are the names." A story without a hook is just a pile of shredded parchment. We think this agonizing tension between the promise and the reality is a modern psychological problem. We think we are the first generation to sit in the quiet and feel the fabric of our lives stretching to the breaking point. But 3,000 years ago, a man who had already been promised a crown found himself shivering in a lightless hole in the earth. He is pressed against a damp limestone wall. He is listening to the armored footsteps of men who want him dead, and he is waiting to see if the hook will hold. The air in the cave of Adullam is heavy with the smell of damp earth, unwashed bodies, and raw fear. David presses his back against the cold, jagged limestone wall, holding his breath as the echoing sound of armored footsteps passes by the cave entrance. He is carrying a divine promise, but he is living inside a nightmare. He has already felt the fragrant oil of the prophet Samuel run down his head, anointing him as the future king of Israel. But right now, there is no crown. There is only a fugitive, huddled with 400 desperate, indebted men, hiding from the iron spears of a jealous madman. This is the ultimate test of the narrative chain. If you were standing in that suffocating darkness, it begins with, "And these are the names." Leviticus does not begin with, "The Lord called to Moses." It begins with, "And the Lord called to Moses." Feeling the chill settle into your bones, you would assume the story had completely broken down. You would assume the prophet's oil was a tragic mistake, and the throne was a delusion. The gap between the glorious promise of the kingdom and the terrifying reality of the cave feels far too wide for any structure to survive without tearing apart. The narrative fabric is stretching to its absolute limit, but the ancient scribe knows what David does not yet see. The cave is not a dead end. It is a necessary joint. The cave of Adullam is the precise location where the shepherd boy is stripped of his pride, and the true king is actually forged in the dark. The heavy, agonizing tension of the waiting is just the silver peg. Sever the covenant. David's desperate flight from Saul will be violently stitched to his eventual coronation in Hebron. God does not write a clean, linear history of unbroken human victories. He writes a messy, chaotic reality filled with betrayals, delays, and terrifying silence. And then he holds the fragments together with the unbreakable hook of his own presence. This is the pattern established in the burning sands of Sinai, recorded by the Babylonian scribes, and secured by the iron spike of Golgotha. But when you close the biblical text and look at the scattered pieces of your own life, Numbers begins with "and." Joshua begins with "and." Judges begins with "and." Ruth begins with "and." The question changes, because the final destination of this single letter is not on an ancient scroll. A scribe pressed a reed pen into Babylon parchment and tied the shattered histories of a nation together. A generation forged silver pegs in the burning sand and kept the heavy linen dwelling of God from collapsing in the wind. A grieving widow walked back to Bethlehem in the dust and was stitched directly into the royal lineage of a king. A prophet attached a single hook to a Hebrew verb and made a future rescue as solid as ancient history. A shepherd shivered in the damp darkness of a limestone cave and found his wilderness bound tightly to a throne. A Roman soldier drove a thick iron spike through wood and fastened the absolute holiness of heaven to the cursed dirt of the earth. A heavy temple veil tore violently from top to bottom, and the broken pieces of humanity were finally pulled into the presence of the divine. Same letter, same hook, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the tabernacle curtains. Massive, staggering sheets of blue, purple, and scarlet linen, weighted down with badger skins, constantly threatening to blow apart in the brutal Sinai wind. This is not a grammatical accident. It is a theological declaration. We tend to view history and our own lives as a series of disconnected chapters. They were not held together by a solid, unbreakable wall. They were held together by small, forged silver pegs that nobody standing on the outside of the tent could even see. If you are in a season where your life feels like it is unraveling in the wind, this is exactly where the text wants to meet you. If you are standing in the painful space between a terrifying yesterday and an unknown tomorrow, the answer is not to take a black marker and cross out the dark chapters. Your failures do not erase your covenant. Your wilderness does not cancel your promised land. The quiet, agonizing waiting room is not a void where God has forgotten you. It is the architectural joint. It is the precise place where the silver peg is taking the weight of your story, refusing to let the trauma of what you survived sever you from the grace of who you are becoming. If this opens something in the text for you, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like the fabric of their life is pulling apart. Pray for us as a season of slavery, a season of wandering, a season of rest. We try to compartmentalize the pain of the wilderness from the joy of the promised land. Keep digging into these ancient texts, and may the God who has never once allowed his narrative to unravel walk with you through the dark spaces between your chapters, and hold the pieces of your history together until the morning comes, acting as if one has nothing to do with the other. But the ancient scribe refuses to let you disconnect them. He begins the scroll with a vav. In biblical Hebrew, this letter functions as a conjunction. It usually means and, but, or so. The letter itself is not just a sound. It is an architectural tool. The story of God and humanity is not a scattered collection of random fragments. He dips a frayed reed pen into a clay jar of carbon ink, The stone floor is cold against his sandaled feet. It is a continuous, unbroken chain. But to really feel the physical weight of what this letter means, you have to leave the scribe's room in Babylon. You have to step back in time, out into the blazing heat of the Sinai Peninsula. You have to watch a nation of newly freed slaves building a massive tent in the sand. The air in the Sinai desert is thick with heat and the rhythmic striking of hammers. A nation of former brickmakers, people whose hands only know the mud of Egypt, are building a house for the divine. They are working with dense acacia wood, beating gold into thin sheets, and spinning blue, purple, and scarlet thread into massive, heavy linen curtains. When God gives Moses the architectural blueprints for this tabernacle in Exodus chapter 26, the instructions are staggeringly precise. Every bronze socket, every wooden frame, every layer of badger skin is meticulously accounted for. Because this is not just a tent. It is a portable cosmos. And in the middle of these blueprints, God commands Moses to craft something small but absolutely critical to the survival of the structure. In Exodus 26 gegen 32, the instructions detail how to hang the veil that separates the holy place from the most holy place. He unrolls a parchment that smells of cured sheepskin and desert dust, smoothing out the rough edges with the palm of his hand. The heavy curtain must be suspended from 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold. And to hold the weight of that massive linen barrier, the craftsmen are told to forge silver hooks. The Hebrew word used for those physical hooks is vav. It is the exact same word, and the exact same shape as the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. When an ancient Hebrew speaker heard the word vav, they did not primarily think of a grammatical conjunction on a page. They thought of a metal peg. They thought of a tent pin driven into the hard ground. They thought of a fastener, the specific architectural joint that takes 2 separate, incredibly heavy pieces of material and binds them together so they will not be ripped apart by the desert wind. This changes how you understand the tabernacle itself. The tabernacle was not a solid, immovable building. It was a fragmented structure made whole by hooks. Without the vav, the pillars stand alone. The curtains collapse in the sand, and the entire dwelling place of God falls to pieces. The hook is the only thing standing between unity and disintegration. The ancient scribes understood the physical power of the vav. He is preparing to copy the most sacred texts of his people, recording the histories of kings who failed and prophets who ran away. So, when they sat down to write the history of Israel, they took that physical silver peg and turned it into a linguistic one. They realized that human history is just like those tabernacle curtains, heavy, distinct, and constantly in danger of blowing apart. A period of horrific famine, a season of miraculous provision, a brutalvar, a quiet birth. They are separate events, separated by centuries, threatening to unravel into random chaos. To keep the narrative of God's redemptive work from collapsing, the scribes needed a peg. They needed something to drive through the parchment to force the pieces to hold together. Moses climbs Mount Nebo. The cold wind bites at his cloak. He looks across the Jordan River, at a land he will never enter, closes his eyes, and dies. The book of Deuteronomy ends in mourning. The era of the great lawgiver is over. And then the ancient scribe takes his reed pen. He drives a vav into the parchment. And it came to pass, after the death of Moses, Joshua takes command. He crosses the river. He watches the walls of Jericho collapse into a choking cloud of dust. He conquers. He divides the land. And he is buried in the hill country. The book of Joshua ends in silence. He does not begin the scroll with a noun. He does not begin with a verb. And then the scribe drives another vav into the parchment. And it came to pass after the death of Joshua, the nation descends into chaos. They forget the God of the wilderness. They cry out under the crushing weight of Philistine iron chariots. They are rescued by flawed judges, only to rebel again in a cycle of blood and ash. The book of Judges ends in anarchy, with the haunting words, "Everyone did what was right in their own eyes." And then the scribe drives another vav into the parchment. And it came to pass, in the days when the judges ruled, a famine strikes the land. A woman named Naomi loses her husband and her sons. She walks back to Bethlehem with a Moabite daughter-in-law, their faces covered in the dust of the road, carrying nothing but grief. The book of Ruth begins. This is the rhythm of the Hebrew narrative. Event. Hook. Event. Hook. Moses dies, and Joshua leads. Joshua dies, and the judges rule. The judges fail, and a king is anointed. The Hebrew Bible is not an anthology of unrelated books. It is a single, massive tent held together by silver pegs. Every time you see the word "and" at the beginning of a biblical book, you are looking at a vav. It forces the trauma of Judges to connect directly to the romance of Ruth. It refused to let. He presses the wet pen to the animal skin and writes a single, straight, vertical stroke. It looks like a nail driven into the page. The failure of one generation sever the covenant of the next. God's story does not restart every time human beings ruin everything. The hook just catches the torn fabric of the tragedy, pulls it tight, and stitches it to the redemption that is coming in the morning. But connecting the books of history is only the beginning of what this letter can do. It does not just act as a bridge. It breaks the laws of physics. It alters the flow of time itself. In the modern English-speaking world, we treat time as a rigid, unbreakable line. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow does not exist yet. But biblical Hebrew does not treat time like a straight line. It treats time like a landscape you can manipulate. Picture the Hebrew prophets, men like Isaiah or Jeremiah, sitting in the ash of a ruined city, breathing in the smell of burning cedar, looking ahead at a messianic restoration that is still centuries away. When they write about these future events, you can hear the scrape of a reed pen across dry parchment, literally bending the laws of time. It looks like a hook hanging from the ceiling of the text. It is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the letter Vav. They do this using a grammatical anomaly called the Vav HaHipuk. The word HaHipuch comes from the Hebrew root hapak, which means to overturn, to invert, to spin upside down. The Vav HaHipuk is the reversing Vav. When a scribe takes this single, hook-shaped letter and attaches it to the front of a verb in the past tense, it instantly flips that verb into the future tense. And when it is attached to a future tense verb, it violently throws the action backward into the past. If the hidden architecture of these ancient texts is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the scribe attaches the hook to the verb. Why would a language do this? Because for the ancient Hebrew mind, prophecy is not merely a prediction of what might happen. Look at Isaiah chapter 9. Verse 6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. In the original Hebrew, those verbs are written in the perfect tense, a completed, finished action in the past. Isaiah is writing about a Messiah who will not breathe his first breath in the cold air of Bethlehem. Most people read the Old Testament in English and assume it is a library of entirely isolated books for another 700 years. But because of the reversing Vav, the future is spoken of as if it has already been completed. Scholars call this the prophetic perfect. When God declares a future event, it is so utterly certain to happen that the language itself forces you to talk about it as if it is already history. The promise is secured. The event is as solid as if it were carved into heavy stone. The Vav HaHipuch is not a quirk of ancient grammar. It is the signature of a God who stands outside of time. It allows the prophet to look at a destroyed temple and speak of its rebuilding in the past tense. It allows the reader to stand in the middle of their own chaos and know that their future rescue is already a finished fact. In the mind of God, the letter bound the books of history together. The letter bent the laws of time for the prophets. But the most important Vav in the Bible is not written in ink. It is driven through flesh. A man lies on his back against a heavy beam of rough-hewn timber. The midday Jerusalem sky is beginning to darken. the air growing thick and unnaturally cold, the smell of dust, sweat, and cheap Roman wine hangs heavy in the atmosphere. A soldier positions a thick, square-headed iron spike over the man's wrist. You finish the book of Exodus, turn the page, and start Leviticus. You leave a story of plagues and seas splitting in half. He raises a heavy iron mallet. He strikes. The sharp, ringing crack of iron driving through flesh and into wood echoes across the limestone quarry to the Roman Empire. This iron spike is a standard tool of state terror. To the religious leaders watching from a distance, it is the final punctuation mark on a blasphemous movement. But in the divine architecture, it is something entirely different. Think back to the Sinai Desert. Think back to the heavy linen curtains of the tabernacle, suspended by those forged silver pegs. Those hooks, the vavim, were the only things holding the dwelling place of God together. But the tabernacle in the sand was temporary. The stone temple in Jerusalem that eventually replaced it was also temporary. Inside that stone temple, at the exact moment, the iron spike is being driven into the cross. A massive, heavy veil still hangs, separating humanity from the presence of the divine. Outside the city walls, the true, permanent tabernacle is being constructed. The body of the Messiah is the final temple, and the architecture requires a fastener. The spike driven through the wrist of Jesus is the ultimate vav. It is the physical peg that binds two impossibly distant realities together. It binds the absolute holiness of heaven to the dirt of a cursed earth. Because when a scribe takes a vav and attaches it to the front of a specific Hebrew verb, taking the immense weight of the story, the scribe will drive the vav into the parchment, binding 1 Samuel to 2 Samuel, refusing to let the wilderness,